I'm going to show you exactly how to get a grade 7. I'm not going to show you a method which I think should work for most people. I'm not going to apply logic. I'm not going to give you the benefit of my 31 years of experience of teaching English. No, I am going to give you the benefit of me obsessing about this and writing hundreds of answers and reading hundreds of answers that have been marked by senior examiners. I haven't just left it at that. I've gone away and obsessively written guides to each question where I try and unpick exactly what students do at each grade. This means the advice that you're going to get in this video will be different from what you're getting in the classroom. That doesn't mean it's the wrong advice. It means it's based on hundreds of exam answers. You don't have to take it, but you will be intrigued. So the question is, what does a grade 7 answer actually look like? What are the ingredients that make it up? It's not your paragraph structures, and it's not whether you zoom in on individual words to do some sort of deep analysis. Let me show you. At number 1, you have to evaluate. That is the second bullet point in the question. You will evaluate the second part of the question, which I'll show you when we dive into it in a minute. But what does evaluate mean? Well, it simply means that you're exploring ideas. The psychological trick is to say to the examiner, look, I'm giving you an interpretation. Other interpretations might be equally valid. How do I show the examiner that? I use a vocabulary that evaluates words like may, might, perhaps, probably, could. Those words show you are exploring, show you are evaluating. I know it sounds like some weird trick, oh, if I only use those words, will I actually get the marks? Yes, you will. It's not just a trick. It absolutely does what it says on the tin. These are evaluative words. Okay, I've banked those. I know what vocabulary to use. How many explanations do I have to write? Now, normally students don't think that way. They think in terms of how many paragraphs they have to write. We'll get to paragraphs in a minute, but the number of explanations is 14. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to find a quote and then explain it, and then another quote and then explain it 14 times. You could, but you don't have to do that, because some quotes you look at and you can think, oh, I can explain 2 things from that quote. That indicates 2 things to me. This implies that. This suggests that. 2 explanations. Okay? So on average, for a grade 7, how many quotes do students actually find? On average, they find 8. So some of them will have 2 explanations to them. The odd one might even have 3. Most of them will have 2 or 1. The examiner doesn't care. Yes, so if you write 3 explanations about 1 quote, that doesn't get you more marks than writing 3 explanations about 3 quotes. They're not looking for a higher level of being able to explode a quote. It's not a thing in exam answers. I know it's a thing in English lessons, but it's only a means to get you to write more explanations. How you write them is immaterial, okay? It's the number of explanations which gets you the marks. And you'll see this in a grade 7 answer I'm going to show you in a minute. So, if you want the paragraph answer, which students always ask, that's probably about 4 big chunky paragraphs, okay? The examiner doesn't care, I don't care, but you might because of the way you've been taught. And so if you want to think in terms of paragraphs, it's 4. I'm going to show you one in just a second. And then another way of thinking about that is, well, how many words am I going to have to write in order to get 14 explanations in? And it's going to be around 300, maybe more. Okay, so that's the psychological place you've got to be in order to get grade 7. Now, let's dive into the screen to see what the answer looks like. As you can see, the answer is 323 words long, and it has 8 quotes in it. You can see those in bold. In yellow, I've got those evaluative words. These are words that show the examiner you are evaluating. Here's the question. I've adapted it from the actual AQA paper sat in November 2020, which you can find online. I've rewritten it in my own words because I've published it in my guide and I don't want AQA to get stroppy about copyright. The questions always follow a formula. So you probably know that it will always start with these words. Focus this part of your answer on the second part of the source. That will always be the case. And it will always be line something or other to the end. Then you will always get a made-up student opinion. This is actually two opinions though. So the first opinion comes here. The disappearance of the giant hound was not a surprise. So my first thing that I've got to think about is, was it a surprise that this dog disappeared or not? And then there's always a second opinion. The writer made it obvious that Robert had imagined the dog, so it was never there. You then get asked an evaluative question. To what extent do you agree? Those words are always the same, and they always invite you to partially disagree. You don't have to, you can 100% agree and still evaluate. The key thing though is the second bullet point which asks you to evaluate. And it says, evaluate here, how the writer presents the giant hound. This bullet point always relates to the second opinion in the question. The first bullet point, the disappearance, always relates to the first opinion in the question. Right, let's check out the answer. I partly agree with the statement as the dog is described as an imaginary character. It had a bizarre coat, a skin dappled in grey and blue and splotches of white like a child's painting. Brilliant. So the student has come up with their point of view. There isn't a mark for the point of view yet, but it's telling the examiner, look, I'm going to partly agree, and that's the easiest way for me to show you I'm evaluating, so I'll never wholly agree. You can wholly agree, okay? But this is just an easier way to say to the examiner that you're evaluating. Then you smash into your first quote. Now you explain what that quote shows. We can infer from this that, like a painting, the dog could be a figure from make-believe. Okay, that is an explanation. It gets a mark. Then the student says, oh, I've got this massive quote here. Are there any words in it that I can zoom in on and say something else about? Yes, there is. I'm going to focus on the word bizarre. That's going to give me another explanation. So, the bizarre description of the dog's colours also suggests that the dog could be magical, like a Disney cartoon come to life. Brilliant. Another explanation, another mark. Then the student says, right, I'm just going to find another quote. Oh, I found this one. Like an old man or a grandfather on a rocking chair, a calm, constant presence that fills a child with confidence. I'm not sure how much of that quote's going to be relevant, so I'm going to write it all down, even though I know it's too long, but never mind, it's not going to take me that long. And I'm going to say what's going on here. So the dog is compared to a grandfather. Bash my quote in. All right, what am I going to explain about it? It seems very unlikely that a dog would look like a grandfather. Hey, that's an explanation. It's short, but it's going to get a mark. Can I say anything else about it? Yes, I can. There's another explanation. It also suggests that Robert is over-imaginative. Brilliant. Now I'm going to find my next quote. I read through the extract. Robert had seen wisdom in the hound's anxious glance. Well, dogs don't really behave with wisdom. That seems a bit weird. So here's my explanation. We can also see that his imagination is too powerful when Robert had seen wisdom in the hound's anxious glance. And now I'm going to earn my money with my explanation, which seems too human to be a description of a real dog. Okay, the next explanation comes from something that isn't even a quote. It's a reference to the text. We can also imagine that the dog is supernatural because his children don't seem to notice the huge dog. It's an explanation that gives a mark. Okay, there's no quote here to show that they don't notice it. There is one in the passage. There's the quote that shows that his daughter has just ignored the dog. She hasn't really noticed it's there. So the student reads on and then finds a massive quote, and they think, okay, well, I'm going to write that whole quote down, even though I'm not sure what I'm going to say about it yet. So they read through the quote. The hound stole a glance at the house, a sudden secretive check, as though scared of seeing someone in the upstairs windows watching. Okay, I'm going to say that shows that this could be just Robert's imagination, because why would a dog behave that way? Right, so I'm going to write that, put in the massive quote, and then I'm going to put in an explanation to get a mark, which suggests that the dog is too human to be real. All right, is there anything else that I can say about that quote? And amazingly, the student says, no, I can't think of anything else, but they don't panic. They just go and find the next quote, which is right in the same place in the passage. It's a description of the dog. You could see wisdom in the hound's anxious glance. Well, that doesn't sound very real, does it? So I'm going to put the explanation. This is too intelligent for a dog and makes us think that the dog is not really there. Brilliant. Mark scored. Okay, can I say anything else about that quote? No, I can't. Okay, I'm going to find the next one. And they read about this bit where the dog is chewing a rag doll, but the rag doll looked very much like Lara, his daughter. That's a bit weird. What will I explain about that? This suggests that the dog is just a projection of Robert's fears for his daughter. So we've got an explanation and it gets a mark. So then they go, well, have we got any other quotes? Oh, I'm just going to take the ending. It's the last quote that I can see that has anything to do with whether the dog's real or not. All right, I'll write about that. The sudden disappearance of the dog, the giant hound was nowhere to be seen, also suggests that the dog was never there. Okay, I've got another explanation that earns me the mark. This makes Robert wonder if the dog was ever even there. That's my second explanation. I've got another mark. So if we go back to the source, don't worry, we're not going to read it. The student has gone through and found the bit that they need to write about. I've stuck that in bold. And they haven't thought, oh, there's loads of quotes that I've got to find in here. They've just gone through, and as soon as they found something to write about, bosh, they've put it down on paper and written an explanation about it. If they could write more than one explanation, they did. If they couldn't, they moved straight on to a new quote. Okay, I told you in the introduction that we needed 14 explanations to get to 14 marks to get the grade 7. What could this student have done? Well, obviously one thing would have been to find another quote to write about. And probably this student didn't know. They've probably been taught, hey, write 4 paragraphs and you'll get the grades. But that's not how the exam works. It's the number of explanations. I'm going to dive into the quotes that the student has already used so you can learn how to use your own answer if you can't find any extra quotes. Okay? Well, obviously, we're going to go to the quotes that are super long, and I'm going to come down to this one because it's the longest, and that gives me the maximum chance of finding something else to say. So the first explanation was, which suggests that the dog is too human to be a real dog. Okay, but if we look at it, we've also got a very nervous dog. It's having a sudden secretive check, as though it's scared of seeing someone in the upstairs window. So that's really easy to link to the idea of fear. So my explanation can be, this is another projection of Robert's fears. There you go. I would get another mark for that extra explanation. Now this causes you another problem as a student who wants a grade 7. If you're writing in paragraphs, there's no way on earth you're going to be counting your explanations like I just did. It's just not possible under exam conditions. But take a look at this. If you lay your answer out with your explanations on a separate line and you number them, you will know that you have written the right number of explanations to get the marks you need. Will the examiner say this is not an appropriate way to write? No, they won't. These are the paragraphs, but instead of putting them into paragraphs, I've put them on different lines. So when you read through it, it makes exactly the same sense in exactly the same order. When you stick it in numbered points like this, you know exactly when you've written enough to get your grade. The other advantage is that you're telling the examiner, hey, I've got 13, or we've added in the explanation, so 14 explanations here, Give me 14 marks, like I dare you not to do that. Now, the reason that is important is that examiners are allowed to disagree by 10% from a senior examiner. In a 20-mark question, that means you might deserve 14 marks, but the examiner could give it 12. And the exam board would say, that's fine, you get 12. So that's why it's so important to number your points, because it would be really difficult if you've written 14 explanations for the examiner to say, I'm only going to give it 12. They'd have to have a damn good reason. But if you stick it in paragraphs, it's much more of a gut reaction from the examiner. So this method can only force the examiner to give you a more accurate mark. Now, if you've not tried this before sitting the actual exam, I will understand if you're too nervous to do it, like why would you? But you can try this in your revision, and you can try this in your mock. Give it to your teachers, ask them to mark it for you, see if writing your explanations on a different line actually forces your teacher to give you the mark you think it deserves. The next video you probably want to watch is how to get grade 7 in one of the other questions. That's the video I'm going to make next, and hopefully it's coming up now.